For those of you that are new, most of you are regulars here. Don't mean for that to sound like a barroom assessment, but how you doing? What we've tried to do here is we're committed to a couple of things. One is to make us effective evangelists and ambassadors. Others are to vary the Sunday school hour and make it multiply useful for you. So sometimes we do, before we get to the main session, we do some mini sessions beforehand, and we're going to do 2 of those. We'll return to them. It depends on the time frames. But what I wanted to bring you to is a who's who's list every week of Christian scholars that are some of the best scholars on the planet. Here's the reason why. We live in a compromised media environment that makes it very, very difficult. It in fact gives you the impression that Christians are just big-hearted rubes. And it doesn't give you the actual true impression that some of the best thinkers on the planet love Jesus. They don't just believe in a higher power, they love Jesus. This gentleman lives in England. He's an Oxford professor named Alistair McGrath. He, like his other Oxonian professor buddy, John Lennox, is one of only 2 people that's ever been able to debate Richard Dawkins publicly. That Dawkins has decided to go head-to-head with these guys. McGrath was featured on a BBC documentary that Richard Dawkins hosted on the problem of evil and suffering and God misbehaving and behaving badly. They spent about 4 hours in the Oxford Chapel filming a dialogue between McGrath and Dawkins. This is back before Dawkins was really, really big. I think he's done 3 documentaries for the BBC. And McGrath was so convincing they cut his entire video portion out. They cut the whole thing out. You can actually see, I think they still have it on YouTube. Somebody got a hold of the video from McGrath and put it on YouTube. You can see them, and they'll stop and go, I'm going to start again because they want it to be more smooth. Both of them stop and go at the beginning, but the BBC cut all of it because he sounded just too reasonable about Christianity was put in too much of a light. The whole point of the documentary was to undermine biblical Christianity, and McGrath was so convincing they excised his entire section. Which took about 5 hours to film. But one of the things I love about McGrath is when he debated Dawkins, he had more of a right to speak about science and theology than Dawkins. Dawkins got a PhD in the domestic pecking order of chicks, small chickens. Not something bad to study, but that's his science PhD, was studying these living animals to see if there's a pattern to them nourishing themselves, these chicks. McGrath, on the other hand, got 2 PhDs, one in historical theology and the other in science, philosophy of science. So if anybody wants to talk about the interface or the distinction or the war between science and theology, it would be McGrath. Very, very, very brilliant man. Started in the sciences and then moved over to theology. Almost any book you get by him, most of his books are academic in flavor, but historical theology, he is solid. An excellent, not the greatest lay writer, kind of can be dense to read, but if you ever need something on the history of Christianity, the history of the faith, or just a general sort of essentials of the faith, you can't go wrong with Alistair McGrath. He's absolutely incredible. Okay, we also wanted to, before I introduce our speaker today, I also wanted to go over, we've kind of left this and I've had some requests to come back to it. A couple of weeks back, we talked about this book by Philip Gulley called The 10 New Rules of Progressive Christianity. And we said there are 10 sort of half-truths that Gulley puts out there and says this is how Christianity needs to change corporately as a group. And we said we may agree with some of them and disagree with some of them. Most of the time, good falsehoods have a truth embedded within them. And so we've done the first 2, and I wanted to do number 3 very, very quickly. We should probably do this over a couple of weeks, but I wanted to bring you progressive suggestion or commandment number 3 from Philip Gulley's book. And this is it. The work of reconciliation should be valued over making judgments. This is an idea that the church has been too caustic and judgmental about things in our modern day and age. Maybe you agree. There could be, if you think there's a way the church corporate could handle social issues a little bit better, no issue here. But when you read more of Gulley's paragraph on this, what he says is we should never call sin from the church. Never. That makes people feel bad and it turns them off and it ruins your numbers. So his suggestion when he fleshes it out a little bit is that not only could the church be a little bit more soft in its reconciliation and its assessment of sin, it just shouldn't say it at all, because not only does it down numbers, but you lose grace in the process. So he says you should surrender the idea of making black and white judgments. You should surrender the idea of ever calling sin out, that the pulpit isn't for that. It's for encouraging people, not discouraging them. So I just wanted to make just a couple of comments. Like I said, this probably should be 2 sessions here. But one of the issues with this sort of thing is that it's profoundly unbiblical to never call sin sin. I don't know how else to say it more straightforwardly. There's some pastors that shy away from that sort of thing because none of us are perfect, right? I've had parents and family ministries that say the same thing. I can't tell my child not to do this because I did it. If it meant that you had to be sinless, right, to make a moral judgment or call sin a sin, none of us could teach anything. None of us could do anything. So when Jesus calls out making judgments and talks about how he excoriates hypocritical judgments, it's when don't make strong verbal affirmations of judgment when you yourself struggle deeply with a habitual sin like that in your life. But to say that the Bible doesn't ever call out, I mean, you can even look at Old or New Testament. It's very, very clear that that we're supposed to, in humility, call sin a sin, and even name sin sometimes like that. And the idea is to soften so that we still have a heart of reconciliation, but to not call sin a sin is itself unbiblical. It's also self-defeating. To say that you should never make judgments is to make a judgment. If you think about it, it's to judge that making any identification of sin is itself an identification. So another reason to at least qualify this progressive commandment by Gully is to look at what he means by it and how he would apply it, and then say, well, if we never call sin a sin, then that's making a judgment about judging itself. And you are being selective. When you look at Gully's, if you look at any of Gully's other work, and it's not much, he didn't publish a lot of books, but you look at his blog posts, Philip Gully, you see that he is extremely judgmental, wonderfully, right, about environmentalism, racism, tolerance. It's just the traditional other moral issues that he says we shouldn't touch anymore because they're so common today. So anything to do with sexuality, abortion, these sort of things, it reminds me of the old. I used to be critiqued as saying you're a voter that's too simplistic. You're only a 2-issue voter. I think we've talked about this before. The reason Christians and sometimes conservatives are extremely concerned about abortion and homosexuality is it strikes at the original government or culture, right? The family culture. It seems to me that for us, we still care about domestic policy, job creation. We still care about foreign policy. But when children and marriage are struck at, that we believe that's going to have a ripple effect. So that's worth talking about, because it's not going to be long if the Bible's correct that if this central culture, the family, is decimated, that are you even going to have that outer band called the national family? So, and last, I think if you don't ever call sin a sin, you can't reconcile. If you think about it, repentance is over, right? You can't ever give a person a chance to repent if there's never identification of doing something incorrect. So I think the heart is so that we don't become caustic and just hypocritical in our judgments, or where it's just judgment. I think of judgments and assessments like medicine. You don't live on medicine, but it's a corrective, right? And it's a necessary corrective sometimes to be nourished. So, that's the idea whenever we talk about doctrine or making delineations or judgments. So there is a proper form of judgment. There is. It's expressed in the Word. And then there's an improper form of judgment as well. So anyway, that's what we'd like to say about Gully's number 3. We'll go through all 10 of these if we have time in the beginning of class. This is number 3. We'll talk about ones where we don't even need to respond because we agree with them. There's 2 of them in particular that only need a miniature amount of qualification. But we'll talk more about these as we go through. But I wanted to introduce our speaker today. I will be removing myself. Just one quick commercial. If you don't remember, we will have William Federer again here next week. And you guys know he was going right to the wire, so the idea of us getting a Q&A with him. So here's what I think we're going to try to do. I'm going to ask him if he'll grace us with just a Q&A session. So next week, if you write the questions down, we can vet them and get them to him, and maybe we'll just do a pure Q&A session with him. He's such a repository of knowledge. know that if we do it next week, even if I stop them with 5 minutes, it's still going to be running to that 5-minute mark. And this is a Socratic class, not in the sense that we're pagans and believe in polytheism like Socrates, but that it's a back and forth, right? The class is predicated on dialogue. So what we'll do is while Federer come here, we'll just tell him to go, take the reins off and go. We'll go all the way through the hour, get as much as we can, put our mouths over the fire hydrant. Then if you want to write questions down, you can leave them with us or send them to us, and then we'll find a time when he can come back and engage in question and answer. Go ahead, Jack. Yeah, we're taping both of them. We're going to edit them and get them out. Great question, because there's some people just don't want to go. Honestly, there's people that want some of the things we've done, but they're just not going to give up their 9:30. Hey, no judgment, right? But that's a big deal. So we're working on making them a little bit more palatable by editing. These wonderful men that work with me are doing this sort of thing. So we're going to make those available and break them up and this as well. So I've had a couple of interactions with the guests that I'm asking to come up because Federer wanted to do 2 weeks in a row, but he's out in California this week. But my friend Roman is, I guess, how many years, Roman, have you been coming to First Assembly? 12 years. This gem has been sitting among us for 12 years. Roman is Russian, and every time I talk to him, he's funny, he's interesting, he's charming, but he's also very, very busy. He's at a high caliber job, got 2 kids, young children. His wife is a professional as well. She's an expert on Dead Sea Scrolls, am I correct? Both of them have, she's got a PhD. He's a professional, very, very busy people. So I've been begging him to do his testimony. Alex is killing you, isn't it? All these positive things about somebody, about your friend. All right, good. Let me see if I can remember. He's great, and I'll look at the check. No, Roman is great, and I've said I want to get you in front of our people. I want to, one of the things I want this class to be as well is if we have any great teachers in the area, I want to bring them in front of you. As many great teachers as possible. I'm trying to get Federer for a Wednesday, Jack. For Pastor, I want him to go get on First Life and get him there because that wouldn't be far off at all. He's doing TV this weekend, as a matter of fact. So, but I wanted to ask Roman to come up, and he's going to actually give his testimony and his journey from Russia to here, and then we're going to take questions and answers probably about the last 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, you can write those down. But come on up, Roman. And give him a warm welcome. So cool. But we love Roman. The only reason he's not in here as a member of the class is, again, kids and life and all that stuff. But I just want him to give his testimony. He's just going to tell us about his life, and it'll be probably even more interesting than when I've had meals with him. So go ahead, Roman.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me over. And really, if there's anything great about Roman, it's glory to God, right? So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for coming. And Dr. Joe and Chris asked me to do this a while ago, and I have 6-year-old and 8-year-old, and it's very hard in the morning to make it to 9:30 with them on a Sunday when they go to school every day. We will let them sleep in. So, but time has changed as of last week, so we got an extra hour. I was able to make it. My journey from Russia to America, just to give you a little bit perspective, I was born, it was still Soviet Union. So I was born there, and a little bit to go back a little bit, even before the revolution happened in Russia. And I talk about it more often nowadays than ever in America, because that idea of communism became, again, more popular in the States, where for so many years there was a Cold War, and America was fighting against communism. But now I see young people who kind of have this interest in socialism and communism. So in about 1917, my great-grandpa, he had 12 kids. They adopted a 13th child, and he was a merchant. But communist ideas won, the revolution happened, and they basically came and they took everything from him. They took his house, everybody got kicked out on the street, they made it into communist offices. Some kids survived, some didn't. We don't even know where all of them went, but my grandma survived, and it was a good thing. But it happened to so many people where they got everything taken away from them, and essentially, although the idea of communism sounds very appealing, where you're going to help poor people, it actually makes everybody poor, because it takes money from people who know how to run businesses. They keep most for themselves, and then they give it a little bit to some to just keep them quiet. And they also make alcohol very cheap. So because they can't do much, they can drink at least very cheaply. And that what happened to my family. So fast forward to about almost 70 years. My parents got married very young, and of course, you've been taught in the Soviet system that there's no God. It's all atheism. You're just survival of the fittest because you're just a product of evolution. Now we're building this society that one day is going to be really exciting. Well, after 70 years, people start realizing when is it coming? You keep telling us that the West is what they call rotting away, but somehow we have empty shelves. We go to the stores, we don't have anything. But oh no, the West is going to go down. We're overproducing. So they tell us on TV, you turn the TV on, like, oh, we're overproducing everything. And then we're like, okay, how about fruit? How about meat? How about milk? You go to the store, there's a big line, and there's barely, if you can get milk, you're lucky. You could get bread, because we lived in Moscow. It was a little bit better than other parts of the country. But I stood in line for bananas for 3 hours once a year, and not even every year. So when I first came to America, I'm jumping a little bit. When I first came to America and I went to American college, we were sitting in the dining hall, and I'm loading my tray with fruit and everything. And they're like, wow, Roman, you're really growing. And I did grow by 20 pounds or so when I first arrived, but I wanted to try everything. Everything was such in abundance. And I said, you guys, you're not eating oranges. And like, it's too much work to peel them. Like, okay, this is not where I'm coming from. So you're lucky if you get it. I remember taking, if I have an apple, I take it to school. If I want to eat an apple, I better eat it in the corner where nobody sees me, because if somebody sees me, like, oh, can I have a bite? Can I have a bite? Because we don't have an apple. We haven't had an apple in a long time. So everything was to be shared. And this whole society tells you have to share everything. You cannot have more than others. So that really promotes a lot of jealousy. If you have a little bit of something, oh, my fridge is 1 inch bigger than Dr. Joe's. I must have stolen money to somehow buy a bigger fridge, because I'm not supposed to have more. But like George Orwell said, everybody is equal, but some people are more equal than others. And the top was always more equal than others. But they keep telling you, hey, just work hard, it's the West. They keep blaming the West. See, the West is oppressing us. If they weren't doing that, we would be doing so great. Was not true. At the same time, you take all spirituality out. So when revolution happened, Lenin wrote, kill as many priests as you can. So they were executing priests left and right, sending them to the gulag. They blew up churches. There are videos of churches being blown up. If they didn't blow them up, they converted them to storage units. So churches, beautiful Russian Golden Dome churches, were converted to storage units. Okay, every textbook tells you there's no God. Every textbook talks about evolution. If there's any philosophy, they're like, why bother with Socrates? We figured it out. We only need Lenin, Engels, and Marx. That's it. We don't need anybody else. So all of a sudden, so that's where my parents kind of grew up in that environment. So when I talk about their experience, I can't blame them for making some mistakes they have made, because again, my people perished for the lack of knowledge. They didn't know any better. Okay, so my parents got married very young. My dad, like most Russian men, was drinking a lot, unfortunately, and but I think the government wanted people drinking a lot, then they would not complain. And alcohol is very cheap. Vodka was always, you can buy a big bottle of vodka for much cheaper than a bottle of beer. So vodka goes a longer way, right, than a bottle of beer in terms of a party. Then they tried to have a dry law in Russia where they wouldn't have any alcohol. This is already when communism was collapsing. They didn't work very well. People were drinking aftershave, and it was just people were dying because anything with alcohol because it was in their system. Alex, I think, gave me statistics that officially I think 25% of Russian males are alcoholics, but he said if you take the definition of AA, actually 70% of Russian men are alcoholics. Okay, so I grew up in this environment where my dad is always drunk, and then he, would sit me down and said, "Did Grandma tell you anything about God?" And he would make me cry because I'm like, okay, well, she did. I'm not supposed. She told me lying is a sin, so I shouldn't lie. And I said, yeah, she did. But he would get very upset, and but I would still say, yes, she did. So he would go on this whole thing telling me how there's no God, this is just, opium for the masses, you don't need to believe this. And I would just, okay, okay, okay. And then when grandma would come, sometimes he would hit her, and it was not that exciting, I would say. So eventually, my parents divorced, obviously. My mom was always, trying to find a better life for the family. But she didn't know any better either. So she was really busy trying to make ends meet and trying to figure out how to have a normal life. So grandma took me in. So grandma, who was the only believer in my family, she got it from her grandma, who was Orthodox, but she didn't know much. Orthodox, a lot of times, you have some churches here and everywhere in the world where things are not explained very well. So she was Orthodox. She believed, but she didn't know what she believed. So one time my grandma, who was taking care of me, she was at this picture gallery in Moscow, very famous picture gallery, and there was a painting of Christ. They've kept some art because it had some value. And she was staring at it because she felt like the face was just glowing. And she was staring and staring. All of a sudden, a lady taps her on the shoulder, and she says, "Do you know what this is about?" And she said, "Well, I know it's Christ, but I don't know anything about it." She said, "Why don't you come to a church that explains something?" So it was an underground Baptist church that was in Moscow that survived through all the communist years. And I was surprised they even had the name on the building, little letters, but they had a little name. So she used to take me there. Of course, we couldn't tell anybody that we were going there. We would say, my friends would say, "Where are you going?" We're like, "We're going to see our best friend." So we would go there. So she took me there. Now, this is touching on the topic, I think, of growing up as, even I'm in Russia, and Christianity is really oppressed. So all those people who are going to church, they are risking their jobs, sometimes they're risking their lives, but they take it very seriously. So they're very serious about it. Now, you don't have this kind of lukewarm Christianity where you can talk the talk, but you don't have to walk the walk. Basically, if they're there, they know what's going on. Now, as a kid growing up in the environment, and I bet it happens everywhere. You go to church, you kind of, hear about Jesus, So one day grandma says, "You have to accept Christ." So she kind of pushes me there. Okay, I go, I accept Christ publicly there. I even get baptized. But I think at that point, I didn't quite realize what Jesus had done for me, because even though I was in the Soviet Russia, I heard about Christ all the time from my grandma. So she really prayed that one day I would go to America. I was about to be drafted into the Russian military for 2 years with no pay, and lots of suicides there. People don't come back the same. It's not impossible, but it was not the best, so she wanted the best for me, so she just prayed that I would go to America. The reason she prayed I would go to America, because American pastors would come every once in a while and speak at the church. And she said, "There's something good about America," because it's very easy for the world to hate America based on what Hollywood produces. And that's all we saw. Russian movies were never violent. There was never anything obscene in Russian movies. All of a sudden, American movies started coming in when the Soviet Union collapsed, and we're like, wow, Americans have no morals. So you see America, really, because we think, oh, that's how they live, so the Russians like, we're going to outdo them. We're going to do even more, right? So, and that happened with when Soviet Union collapsed, when the Russians, since they didn't have any morals really left, you're not thinking 10 commandments at the back of your head, thinking, oh, do not kill, do not steal. You don't have that. They told you just survival of the fittest. So the Russian mafia got really ruthless. They outdid the Italian mafia, no problem, because they were just, well, I'm strong, I take it from the weaker, and I don't know any other way to make money, because now the government is not taking care of me. I just have to take care of myself. So it was just lawlessness all over. Very sad, but that happened. But because Russia opened up, the American missionaries came in, and my mom, who denied God all her life and didn't want to hear anything from her mother, the grandma who raised me, she became a Christian. She was going to this. She wouldn't go. She wouldn't even go to the church that my grandma used to go to. She's like, no, like they wouldn't get along. So all of a sudden, American missionaries come in, and she goes to the American church because she's interested in anything but Russian. She's like, I'll go to anything to get out of here. So, and wonderful services. She already had studied some English, so she knew enough English. They had translators, but her life all of a sudden transformed. She became a Christian, which, like we didn't really have hope for that as much. We should always have hope, but we were praying for her. But we're like, oh, I don't know if she'll ever become a Christian. So all of a sudden, my relationship with my mom got restored because I didn't have a relationship with my mom and I didn't have a relationship with my dad. All of a sudden, it got restored to where we're like best friends now because she accepted Christ, and now we could speak the same language. There's always a period of sanctification that goes on. So grandma prays, I go to America. All of a sudden, I get offered to go to America. And it's Williams College in Massachusetts invites me to teach Russian for a year. I said, okay, I'll go. And she said, go, better than the Russian army. So, so I go there, I teach Russian, and my first impressions, of course, besides all the food I was eating, and peanut butter I had never tried, and graham crackers and all that, and cream cheese. So it was very exciting. I discovered the gym, too, a few months later. That's why you need the gym on campus. Because I'm on a full meal plan, and I'm the type I want to try everything. But then I come to America, so I had this one church in Moscow, which was underground, and people were serious about it. Then I come to America, and I have so many churches. So I said, wow, what's an Episcopal church? What is Catholic church? What is that? So I went visiting every single church I can find. And I'm like, wow, every 2 blocks, and this is Massachusetts, right? There's a church. And I go in, and I'm trying to kind of figure out, and then I see some of those church people behaving worse than some of my non-believing friends. And I'm like, okay, so why do you go to church? I felt like, you shouldn't be doing these things. So I go to a lot of churches, which eventually makes me feel like, oh, I can't find a good church. I don't know where to go, which I think it's an enemy's tactic. No church is perfect, but you should not leave the fellowship of believers. Hey, if you can go and make it better, right? But the enemy always works slowly. It's like boiling a frog, right? You slowly, it doesn't realize, and then you cooked. So he was working on me by saying, oh, you don't have to go to church every Sunday. It's okay, So kind of here you have lots of churches, but I'm not going every Sunday. I go once in a while. I always, find excuses. I didn't like the sermon. I didn't like something like that. I didn't like the music. I don't know. People are not warm enough. Plenty of excuses, right? You always can justify whatever you're doing. So, but that's a slow drift. Then, as you drift away from the fellowship, things of the world start seeming okay to you. When you're really focusing on Christ, you feel like, oh, this is not all right. As you get closer to Christ, you look back at your life and you feel like, I thought that was okay. Well, now I'm like, I wouldn't do this. See, this is, as I get closer to Christ, and it's more Christ-like, like definitely not. But if you drift away, then things of the world start seeming okay. But the enemy leads you there so he can eventually try to destroy you. And I've seen this happen many times where it's a slow drift, and this is okay, this is okay, this is okay. Then, boom, darkness, depression, and thoughts of suicide. I've seen this happen many times. So it kind of was happening to me, plus all this material abundance, all these things you could do. But thank God, Williams, I really liked it. I said, can I stay? They gave me a scholarship. They had a fund that was called Haystack Scholarship, and apparently it was a haystack on campus of this liberal arts college, and 5 Christians hid in that haystack in 17-something, and then they decided to do missions because it was raining. They hid in the haystack, and to honor those 5 missionaries, and they still do it, they give a 5 scholarship to foreign students a year. And it was a full scholarship, so I'm like, okay, great, I love it. So I feel like even though maybe my walk with God was not as strong, I feel like God was still blessing me as his child. So I feel like obviously he never left me, but he was like, when are you gonna take me more seriously? Because you know the truth, but are you acting like, are you living like? I was like, when I look back at my life, I feel like I had a bigger degree of selfishness than I have now, because I didn't take God as seriously. I didn't understand what Christ had done for me. So, and my biggest dream, because I came from a really broken family, I remember I was studying Spanish, I was in Spain, and there was a class, and they asked everybody, oh, what do you want to become when you grow up? What do you want to become? And there was like, astronaut, a business, so I want to be rich. I was like, I just want to have a normal family. That's my biggest dream in my life, just to have a normal family where there's mom and dad and children, and we all get along. And as I looked at famous people, rich people, any people, I was like, wealth does not guarantee you a good family. It looks like it amplifies a lot of problems because you think if there's a problem, you're going to throw money at it, right? But you don't work through the issues that you're supposed to work through. Famous people, and I know people follow them, but most of them can't keep a family. So like, okay, that's not the way. And then like, I know the way. I know it has to be Christianity. I have to build my house on the rock, right? So, but I'm still slowly drifting, and I'm just not taking it seriously until I reach a point. At that point, I got accepted into Yale grad school, so I'm a Yale graduate student, so I'm blessed, thank God. But my desire is just to have a family. And then, like, why is God not giving me a family? I'm saying this to some young people and adults. I feel like my dream was driving me to I was not trusting God to take care of my dream, even though it was a good dream. But you try to help God out with His promises a little bit sometimes, right? It's not it's not the way to do it. So I reach a point when I feel like I'm broken. I feel like I'm at the point of this darkness. I'm depressed. I'm suicidal. I don't see the point of living anymore. And then I think, well, what have I done? I believe I can still turn to God where He'll forgive me. But now what dawned on me that I'm suffering because of my own sin. I'm really suffering for my own sin, and I deserve it. I really deserve it. I couldn't say, oh, why God did you put me in this difficult spot? I feel like I really deserve it because I was not taking you seriously. I was being selfish. I was doing whatever I wanted. And many times I didn't act like a Christian, and then I could point still fingers at other Christians, like, well, they're worse than me. Of course. Well, if you compare yourself to Hitler, you're probably better, right? But it's not the measure. So, and that moment, I was really just crying, and I decided, no, the enemy is sending me thoughts that I don't want to live, but I'm going to turn to God and ask Him for forgiveness. And I just was asking Him for forgiveness. I was on my knees. I was crying, I don't know, for 6 months. And I finally understood. I'm like, well, I'm suffering because of my own sin, and I deserve it, but Jesus suffered for me, and He did not deserve it. Oh, I get it. I get the message of Jesus, finally. This is like, 2004, and in Russia I had accepted Jesus in 96. I still didn't realize what it meant. And I thought, you know what, I think a lot of Christians don't understand what Jesus had done for them, because if you do understand, you take Him very, very seriously. So I started going to church again. I had some good Christian friends that kind of took care of me. Well, I felt like I had nobody in this world. I felt like I was so alone. And then they took me to church. I went there, and I really wanted to be baptized again. And I asked the pastor, "Is it okay if I get baptized again?" He's like, "Well, normally you don't do that, but I really get it this time. This really means a lot to me. Now I get it, please. And I want to invite everybody to my baptism." So I invited everybody. And of course, being on campus at Yale, they have 60% international students. So people, Hindus came, and everybody came to my baptism. It was really unbelievably beautiful, and it meant so much to me. And I was, sending messages about Jesus Christ being the Savior to everybody. Some people had to block me because I was being over the top. I was too excited. So, but it's okay. Maybe there was a seed that later will grow. And then I go through this probably. I'm still crying until one time I'm in the shower, and there's this baby shampoo Johnson. It says baby shampoo, no more tears. It says no more tears. so I'm like, okay, I think I'm done. I think I'm not going to cry anymore. So no more tears. Johnson & Johnson, right? So prophetic message. So good. I'm very happy. Okay. And I go through this. I don't know if you've experienced, when you get born again, you really go through this kind of honeymoon with God, that everything you do and everything, just every little detail, you feel God's hand in it. It's so alive to you. It's just, it's amazing. And you think it's going to go on forever and ever like this. Okay, so I go through maybe 8 months when just everything is just perfect, and it fits, and it everything works really well, and I can feel God in my heart, and I'm so sure now. Now I know what I believe. Like there's no doubt about it, and I'm so grateful that I can never repay Him back for what He did for me. So then about after 8 months, what happens? And I'm telling you this because I think I'm not the only one who it happened to. I kind of feel like, okay, now it's coming down again. Now I'm coming back to reality. I have to deal more with reality. And over a period of a few months, I start kind of like slipping again. But now God knows what I know, so He slaps me really hard. And I know, some people can say, "Oh, it just happened." No, I just, go to the gym. I just dislocate my knee, and I'm on crutches for a couple of months, and I know exactly why it happened. I know my Father who loves me, He slapped me. I still have pain in my knee when it's about to rain, so it always reminds me, like a thorn in the flesh kind of thing. Like it reminds me where I came from. So no. Now that you know the truth, do not deviate from the truth, because God punishes those who He loves. And like, okay, I'm as a father too. I have to tell my kids, hey, I need to, nudge you this way, because if not, you're gonna fall off the precipice. So I'm grateful He did that for me. So then my biggest dream was to have a family, right? And I felt like it was messing with my head so much that I had to give it up. I really had to say, you know what, Lord, let your will be done. If you never want me to have a family, I'm fine with that. And I really meant it. I really felt like, if it's God's will for me to be alone for something that I long for so much, then I should be fine with it. So I give it up. And I feel like, okay, that's it. I probably will never get married. I probably will never have children, but I'm fine with that. It's good. So about 3 days later, I met this girl. And 3 days later, we kind of got engaged, and 6 months later, we got married. And I've been married for 13 years. And it's been it's been a really wonderful marriage. And we have 2 boys, and I feel like I got more than I had ever expected, and better than I had ever expected. But I had to surrender to God and said, no, you do it. Glory will go to you, not because I'm going to find a spouse for myself. I'm not going to be able to do it. It's going to be failure. So I think it happens with many, many dreams like that, where you have to lay it before Jesus' feet, and it can be a good thing. But if He doesn't, if you are not ready, or it's not His time, then you kind of working in vain, and maybe you're doing things that are outside of His will. So I'm happy I gave it up. So I love my wife, I love my kids. It's wonderful. God always has sent me better things that I wanted when I told Him, let your will be done. And I said, it's fine. If I don't get it, I'm good. For everything you've done in my life, I'm so blessed. If I don't get it, it's fine. I don't need to get it. So I think that's where I'm at. I have many more stories of God blessing me with a good job and good partnership with Alex and him being a friend. But I wanted to get this message out and tell you where I came from, how I came to God, even growing up in a somewhat Christian household. And I do believe that the enemy tries to waste your time. He will do everything to just distract you and waste your time on things that do not matter. Because in the end, you look back and like, oh, why didn't I listen to God right away? I would have stayed all this time. All this time I could have used for something more useful, but I was distracted on things that were not important. So let His will be done.
Can you tell us just a little bit more about your experience in the underground church in Russia? If you have any more stories about that experience?
Well, the main point of that church was, again, people had to take it very seriously. I don't know if you heard the story. There was even a story how people are having a Bible study, and it's during that time when the Christians were really persecuted, and they're having a Bible study. All of a sudden, there's a guy in military outfit with a machine gun shows up at the door. He rings the doorbell. They open, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "Well," he sees they're having a Bible study. So he points the machine gun at them, and he says, "I give you a chance. If you renounce Christ now, you can leave. Stand up and leave." So some people stand up and leave. He says, "Okay, second chance," pointing the gun at them, saying, "Do you want to renounce your faith and leave?" Some more people get up and leave. Third time, he is asking them. Last time, nobody is getting up. So he says, he puts the gun away and he says, "Now I'm among my true brothers and sisters." you really had to kind of be ready to die. And it was not always like that in Russia. The early years of communism, you really had to be ready to die for your faith. When you have that type of faith, and I think when Jesus talks about be cold or hot, not lukewarm, it's very important, because you come to the West, which was built on Judeo-Christian values, and been blessed through it, now losing those values, thinking, oh, we can do whatever we want, and a lot of lukewarm believers, it's going to crumble if people do not take it seriously. But whenever American pastors came to visit, we would always like, oh, I bet they have some pens and pencils that say something in English on them. Oh, I want to get a chewing gum, you know. And we would collect the chewing gum wrappers because they were so exciting. They had something in the foreign language, and then we would trade them. So.
I was just wondering, in the Russian Federation today, is it possible to be openly Christian, or is it still an underground situation?
So in Russia, when all the missionaries came in, when Soviet Union collapsed, good things came in and bad things came in at the same time. I remember being on the subway, and there's always somebody in white robes, the White Brotherhood, whatever they call themselves. This is the end. This is the date for the end of the world. Sell everything, give us your money, you're going to be good. So a lot of cults came in at the same time. So good things happened, like my mom got saved from real Christians who came, but then the government started saying, we're not gonna give up this control. We're gonna try to increase the nationalistic feeling, and we also don't want all these foreign outlets that maybe pretend to be religious. Maybe they're spies. You know, it's easy to blame, because that's what people heard for 70 years, that all foreigners are spies. So they said, no, if you're Russian, you're Orthodox. So Christianity is not banned, but it's kind of on par, maybe similar what happened with Constantine in the 4th century, where Christians are not persecuted anymore. Okay, we're not throwing them to the lions. Now everybody is Christian, and those people who had no idea what it meant and maybe still kept worshiping the gods, pagan gods, were told, okay, now you just pray to Saint Michael, now you do this. So Russian people, they will all say now they're Christian, but not too long ago they were all atheist. What changed? The government said you're all Christian, and because you're Russian, you're Orthodox, and it kind of tries to also contrapose that we're against the West, we're Russian, this is your identity. Do Russian priests do a good job explaining anything to the Russian people? No. Basically, you kind of a CEO Christian, you know, Christmas and Easter only. You go for Christmas, maybe, and maybe you go for Easter and put a candle. Or if you have troubles in your family, you go and put a candle to this saint or that saint. They don't know much more than that. And the priests that were kind of a little bit more Protestant, if you want, although they were Orthodox, and they would have TV, they would try to have TV programs and explain what the scripture tells. Most of them were killed. So no, they don't persecute Christians. They call themselves Christians, but if you try to do anything that's out of more like not Orthodox, they don't want it. The reason they don't want it because the gospel makes people free, right? Why do all those countries don't want the gospel? It makes people free. They're not going to depend on the government. They're not going to say, oh, the king will save me. They're going to answer to God instead. They don't want that. They want control.
When you refer to government, who is in the government who establishing those rules? I mean, being Christian or non, accepting Protestant or not, what is this body, controlling body?
Well, the controlling body really is the same controlling body that were old communists. Now they kind of transferred, now they call themselves Democrats, whatever they call themselves, but they're the same people that maintain control where Soviet Union collapsed, except now they don't have to hide their wealth, right? So when Soviet Union collapsed, all of a sudden, oh, now foreigners are coming, maybe economy is going to do better. And it was such a mess. in terms of legal, if you take capitalism and you put no laws around it, it's just survival of the fittest, right? Then that mafia, if you don't know what you own and people can take it from you, it's lawlessness. So capitalism does not work without laws, and that's what happened in Russia. As it was getting really messy, the Russian people, as they always do, they said, we need a strong king. We need Stalin back. You know, people say it all the time. Oh, Stalin was great. There was order. Yeah, he killed 20 million his own people, but the appearance was of order. Yeah, you see people talking about Stalin. So they always think that a good king will save them. The solution for Russia is not economic. The solution for Russia is spiritual. They need to go back after 70 years of atheism and reestablish their morals, when the government will say, you know what, we're going to do the right thing even if it doesn't benefit me directly today. We're going to do the right thing for the people. No, right now they're doing what's best for them. They're telling people lies, saying, hey, the West, it's all the West. They're always blaming somebody else, and they'll put a finger at themselves. And that story resonates with the people. So the old communists and same government, they decided, why would we give up control? If we let all these foreign churches and organizations come in, we're going to give up control, because you're going to go and tell them, no, the West is not doing so badly, West is not so bad. So like, no, let's keep it the way we used to have it during the Soviet years. And therefore, now we're not going to deny Christianity, we're just going to make it a nationalistic thing. We're going to reopen the churches and say, you're Russian, you're Orthodox, and that goes just against everything that's the West. So who makes those decisions? The president, his cabinet, whoever does not want to lose control, they make that decision.
So you still teach college, is that correct?
I don't teach college, no. I work with Morgan Stanley, I do investments.
Okay.
So
I was just wondering, when you encounter someone who is leaning toward the socialist ideas, because it is happening more often, do you ever say anything? How do you address it? Do you address it?
I always say something.
What do you
Actually, I
say?
cannot not say, because they cannot deny my experience. You can have an idealistic idea, in Europe, we have this. Medicine was free in Russia. Education was free, right? Everything free. But most of the times you go to the hospital, they will not attend to you unless you give them a bribe, right? So is that really free? So everything was based on bribe system. And let's say Joe works at a meat factory, Alex works at a shoe factory. He steals some shoes, he steals some meat, we trade, okay? Everything, that whole thing, basically working against the government and being dishonest, is so ingrained in the Russian culture. And not only Russian, you see it all over the world, because from the top, they don't set the morals right. They basically tell you, for you to survive, you have to be dishonest. That's why I tell people, when you come to America, white people are trying to get in, right? You look at a country, are people trying to get in or get out of this country? They're still trying to get in for the most part. So why? Because you can work hard and you work honestly, having nothing, and you can achieve something in this country. In Russia, no, I haven't seen that. And I haven't even seen it that much in Europe either. So I do tell people, look, you never lived that shortages of everything. You never lived when they lied to you. And look at any country that claimed to be communism. It has never worked anywhere. Will idea always sell? I think it will always sell. If I'm going to come and tell everybody, hey, let's take money from the rich and I'll give it all to you, you're like, okay, we don't have to do anything. Let's do that. So that always, you almost always even going to sound nicer. Instead of me telling you, hey, let's go get to work and make a better living for your family. Well, what if I don't want to work? Maybe somebody else can give it to me. So, but then you create dependency. That's why divorce in Russia was also, they were happy. Yeah, you want divorce? Sure, you depend on the government now. Great, you're not going away anywhere. No, you need us. So they made you completely dependent. That's why the system, when it's collapsed, people are like, oh, we're like babies. We don't know what to do. The government gave me an apartment to live. The government provided me with a job, not a good job. I could never make more. Whether I'm sweeping the streets or I'm a doctor, I make the same amount of money. So there's no motivation to work more. So it creates an environment where you just pretend to work because you can get paid the same, and you just sit through the hours, and then you go home. And then if you can steal a little bit here and there and trade it, okay, a little bit better life for your family. But not in any honest or productive way. Quality of goods goes down big time. That's why, like, hey, the West has competition. All these companies are competing with each other. You have commercials. We didn't have commercials in Russia. The government is not going to advertise against itself. Like, you either have it or you don't have it, right? You fly a Russian airplane, I always say, and the stewardess says dinner, and you say, what are my options? She says, no dinner, right? So though, if you get it, you're lucky. And the quality just kept going. Russian cars, my goodness, look at the Russian car. I mean, with no competition, the quality goes down. Why would anybody bother to work hard to make it better if they're not going to be rewarded for this? They're just going to not work, and then see what happens, and we don't know what to do.